to be asked or asked and answered to your satisfaction. So I'd like you to tell me your name, and I'd like you to tell me what your question is when you introduce it. Yes, sir. If you need the mic, I'll bring it to you.
No, my name's Bob. I got a question. Do you know?
You said Bob?
Bob. Two parts. Are you familiar with a software company called Cytle? And do you have contracts with them?
I do know Seidel, and no, we don't.
Okay. I'm told that Cytle is embedded in the computers in the various counties here, and I was told by Judge Barger that they do have that on their software system. And my question to you is, at 7:58 on election night, I was monitoring both the Secretary of State website for KIV and also CNN. At 7:58, CNN reported KIV having 5,033 votes, and the Secretary of State's office has 3,140. Why does CNN have more updated information than your Secretary of State website?
Well, you have to ask CNN that. I can tell you how we get all of our numbers. And let me explain something else to you that I think is real easy for anybody in here to understand. First of all, if you want to know what the numbers are in real time, that's real easy to do. I'm not sure exactly how many polling sites we have in this county. Does anybody know?
About 90.
Okay, let's just say you've got 90. So if you've got 90 and you're running county-wide, the easiest way to know whether or not you've won or not is by doing this. On election day, you have 90 people that are working in the county for you, and you send those 90 people to the 90 polling sites.
That's right.
And then the 90 people that are in the 90 polling sites will call a phone number that you've asked them to call, and they will tell you what your vote total was at that box, and you write it down. And as soon as you can add up those numbers for yourself and for your opponents, then you're going to know what the total is. That's the end of it. And if the numbers that are sent from that polling place to the central polling location in Huntsville are not the same, then there's an issue. It just happens that in all 46 elections that I've administered since I've been your secretary, the numbers have been the same every time in every location. Let me get back to your question about election night reporting. In 2016, we wanted to make sure we had election night reporting in Alabama. They had never had it before, where a citizen like yourself or any member of the media could go to our website and check out the reports in real time throughout the evening. So we started the process, and I was told by people who'd been a part of this before, you're not going to get the counties to participate because it's not required by law. We worked with all of them, we talked to all of them, and they reported all of their information to us throughout the evening. And now we have all of our results in by 10:30 to 11 o'clock on election night. But one of the things that certain counties do is instead of reporting the results as they receive them, and we have a hardened computer that we purchased for each one of the 68 jurisdictions in the 67 counties, where they take the jump drive that came from that 1,980 polling sites, they plug it into that drive, then it transmits that data from that particular location to Montgomery for unofficial returns for that evening. Now, some of those people elect to do that as the boxes come in. So we receive up-to-date information as it's made available at the central location, the central reporting location in that county. But other counties decide we're just going to send it in at the end of the night when it's all collected and it's all submitted. Now, I don't know where CNN or the Associated Press or AL.com or anybody else gets their data. But I know where we get it, I know when it comes in, and I know where it comes from, and that's the way that it works.
It's my understanding that the data from all of the news organizations comes from Edison, which is a software company out of New York. And they get their information from Cytle, and Cytle gets their information from the counties across the United States. That's how the reporting chain goes. And I wanted to know if you were aware of the fact that CNN and Fox News and everybody else gets more updated information than what you have in Montgomery.
Well, they don't get more information than we get because we get the information that we get.
Updated.
And we get the information from the counties as it's reported to us. But I can tell you this, I don't know any county, I mean, you can call Greg Kane, or you can call Frank Barger, or you can call any probate judge in the state, and you can say, do you give your information through an electronic transfer of data to a central news outlet or a remote news outlet or any other group like that anywhere in the nation? And the answer to that question is going to be no, period.
I asked Judge Barger that question myself personally. He said it's a software program on their computer that runs in the background. It's a relational database system so that they can do sorting and different methods. And so the answer from him was yes, he does have Cycle.
Well, we don't know if we're talking about the same thing, so I'll tell you this. If you want to get Frank Barger to come here and talk about what he does, then you can talk to him about that. I'm just telling you what we do in Montgomery.
We'll get Frank, hold on one second. We'll get Frank Barger about those machines. I do know that CNN, and it's a very good question. Appreciate the question. Matter of fact, I saw you on TV looking at the machines with Frank Barger. So I know that he's been in that inspection, putting his eyes on it. I do know that in my experience just this past cycle last week, and I drove around all day long, all across this huge county. And what tends to happen is you have people updating frequently throughout the day. You know, they'll stand in, they'll make a call 350 or 400 or 500. At the end of the night, those machines will spit out a receipt. They'll spit out a receipt. So at 7:05, whenever they close that box, they spit out that receipt, and that receipt sometimes can be from him all the way to that last table. But at the end, there's a number, and you'll have some news reporters sometimes looking at the bigger boxes or what have you. So there is a receipt.
The receipts that he's talking about have to be printed out. That's right. And they have to be, they print out a couple of copies of the tape, but one of them is going to be posted at an observational location there at that polling site. So anybody that wants to drive by there, anybody that's already there, can look at it and see what the results are of that race that was featured at that particular box that night. That's always able to be done. Another one is taken and wrapped around the jump drive, and that's submitted to the central polling location in the county at the county seat. That's just the standard operating procedure.
And also, because you said that that software was a relational database, if it's an embedded real-time operating system, which is part of my expertise, if it's a real-time, it may keep it in an embedded database. You may be right. But that doesn't mean that it's electronically coded and given in real time. We don't know that to be true. So Frank, we'll get Frank in and talk about that. All right, next question.
Okay, I'm Helen, and what about that ERIC database where, I mean, that one's, got a lot, well, there's suspicion about the Soros, one of the Soros organizations being involved with that. So I'm concerned, why are we...
The Electronic Registration Information Center, which was founded in 2012, before I became the secretary, was founded after the Kansas Interstate Cross-Check System was created by Chris Kobach, who was just elected last Tuesday to be the new Attorney General in Kansas. When Chris was the Secretary of State, he was first elected in 2010 to be the Secretary of State in Kansas. He wanted to find a way to put together a database that could compare lists of voter registration information from member states. So when I became the secretary, we were not able to join the Electronic Registration Information Center or the Kansas Interstate Cross-Check System because we didn't have a law that allowed us to share our information with other states. So we did research on both of those systems. We thought both of those were outstanding systems, and so we reached out to them to see about membership, determine what it would take for us to join, and then I asked Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth, who was a freshman in the House of Representatives, to carry that legislation for me, and he did. It passed both chambers, signed into law by Governor Bentley, enabling us to join. Now, the Kansas Interstate Cross-Check System allowed you to compare the list of people who were registered to vote with all the other member states, but it did not allow you to check whether or not somebody was voting in more than one jurisdiction at the same time in the same election cycle. But the ERIC system did. So we thought it was in our best interest to join both of those. And we did. Subsequently, what we've been able to discover is when people have participated in more than one election in the same cycle, and if they've been registered in more than one state at the same time, it has helped us remove those people and take them off the voter list. It's also helped us identify people that need to be prosecuted. We've not made this public yet. This is the first time I'm sharing it, but 22 people have been referred to the Attorney General's office for prosecution directly because of the Electronic Registration Information Center, because of them participating in more than one election at the same time, being registered in more than one state at the same time. I'll also tell you that we have never had an introduction, and the Kansas Interstate Cross-Check system is no longer in existence now, because when Scott Schwab became the secretary, he didn't want to keep it up. And so Chris was a real polarizing figure anyway, and so some people just saw that as a way to remove themselves from that. So the Kansas system does not work anymore. But there's never been an incident of occurrence in the history of the ERIC system where a vulnerability has been exposed, there's been any corruption of data, there's been any leak of data, there's been anything related to ERIC not working exactly the way that it's supposed to work. Now, this conversation about George Soros, information had been introduced that he was a part of this process or he gave money to create it. All that's a lie. Matter of fact, not only is it a lie, it's never had any empirical data provided to prove it. Now, it started with the Pew Charitable Trust. And George Soros is somebody that gives money to the Pew Charitable Trust. But there may be people in this room that give money to the Pew Charitable Trust. But there's no communication that's ever been recorded or documented that George Soros has had directly with any board member with ERIC. He's never attended an ERIC meeting. He's never had anything to do with the ERIC process. There are some things that need to be addressed with ERIC, which we're currently trying to get done with the ERIC board. We have membership on the ERIC board, and we have had since we joined in 2016. And it is a system that has been very, very successful in helping us identify potential voter fraud and prosecuting potential voter fraud. And the state that has been just as aggressive as we have been, that's working just as hard as we are to use that as an effective tool, is Florida. And about 6 weeks ago, Governor DeSantis was on TV talking about ERIC and its importance to election administration in the state of Florida. So that's where we are with ERIC and why we are where we are with ERIC. Now, I will say this, one of the things that Wes Allen, who's going to be the next secretary, has said is that he does not think that ERIC is a good tool to use. But one of the things that he has said is that George Soros has been a part of it, but he's not been able to prove that, nor has he been able to show any empirical data to show that it has happened in the past. The question that I have asked when people have asked me about ERIC is, okay, let's just say that you don't like ERIC. You don't like the Electronic Registration Information Center. You want Alabama to separate itself from the ERIC system. What tools are you going to use? What information are you going to use that's going to help you identify those people that are voting twice or more in more than one area, and how are you going to keep that from happening, and how are you going to prosecute those people? Because currently there is no system that is available to accomplish that, and there is no way to identify that information outside the ERIC system.
Let me stop you right there. Hold on before we go to the next question.
Voter fraud since I've been the secretary. So people say that, does voter fraud exist? Is it current? What's going on? No state in the union has had as many convictions on voter fraud as we've had in the period of time that I've been the secretary. None. No state in the union. And there's only one database that contains all of these names, and that's on the Heritage Foundation's list. So I think that's important for you to know, and you can go review that for yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. Bob, do you have another question? Or somebody over there? You say Clay?
Yes, Clay. Yes. You said that not every electronic image of the ballot needs to be kept, right? But yet Alabama says that they don't have to be federally certified, but they have to meet the federal standards. And by not keeping every electronic image of every ballot, you're violating that standard. So
No, so we're not violating any standards, and we're also not violating any laws. And I will also tell you this. What I want to know is why somebody would want us to keep a digital image of something when you keep the real thing.
Because
Explain that to me.
The image is what the machine checks. It does not check the real ballot. It checks.
Oh, it gets, where do you think it gets the image?
When it's scanned.
Well, where do you think it gets the image?
It,
From the real ballot, which we keep.
sir,
I'm just asking a question.
I've tested in the voting system test labs for 9 years. I'm a computer scientist, and I know exactly how the software operates and functions. And I know the VBSG, all versions of it. And it is a requirement by the standards to keep every image, because that is what the software looks at. And you cannot, from a chain of custody perspective, just because you have the paper's not counted.
Okay, so let me ask you again, where do you think the image comes from?
From the paper.
Okay, so if we keep the ballot, the paper ballot, and you ever needed to recheck it, you could take a machine that had never been used before, and you could set it aside. It could be brand new, and you could run it.
And that invalidates the test.
Which,
Because you used it.
and then you can keep the paper again and again and again. Now, I'm trying to figure out why anybody would feel like the digital image is more important than the actual ballot that was voted.
Because that's what the system counts. It looks at that image.
But if you need to recheck it, you've got the paper ballot, which is the thing that a person marked. The person did not mark a Scantron. They had the Scantron read the paper ballot, and we keep the paper ballot.
You check it with the image for the chain of custody. A non-technical person can figure that out.
Let me explain to you again. We keep the paper ballot. Now, I've never had a soul that has come to me and said, I would rather have the digital image than I would the paper ballot. That makes absolutely no sense.
It makes perfect sense, because from a chain of custody perspective, you have to have all portions involved. That would include the data on
The chain of custody starts with the ballot being voted, first with the ballot being held, then it being distributed to the polling site, then it being voted at the polling site, and then once it's voted, having it retained, restored, and captured, and held for a period of time as required by law.
For potential.
And that is the end of it.
So,
It makes no sense. So, well, this is, you know, if this is a concern, let me just say this. This is a bottom line, okay? If that concerns you, this is what I'd encourage you to do. Just go to any one of the circuit court judges in this county, any one of them, and say, I want to file a lawsuit challenging the results of the election. You pick the race, you determine which race it is. You say, I want to have access to the ballots. I want to have access to a machine that's never been used before, and run it and then see what the difference is. And see, once you do that, then you're not going to have this conversation anymore.
Sir, the question I asked you was, the federal standards are quite clear that the image is supposed to be maintained and taken for every ballot. You said that the state of Alabama does not do that.
No, we
So how do you
have the
justify-
images. We don't retain them for use for you to review them. We don't.
You're
And we're
supposed
not going to do that. Of course, it doesn't matter to me because
Sir,
I'm not going to be the
sir,
secretary
by the
anymore.
standard, they're supposed to be required.
here's my point.
Let me say this one more time.
Hold on, John. Here's my point of reference. Let's have appropriate decorum and move on. Number two, let's make certain that we're not being disrespectful to the speaker or to the other members who want to hear. Now, number three, you're able to ask your question, but you've had it for 5 minutes now, and other people may want to come back. Can I get a question, come back to you? Because I hear your point. Your point is circular. I get what you're saying. And at the end of the day, John's not going to be the Secretary of State in a few more days. So you may want to check with.
I got no more elections to administer.
He has none anyway. So we'll have Wes up here. We'll have Wes, and Wes Allen will be able to do that for you, and we'll have Frank Barger will be here as well. And when we do that, I want you to come back and do the same thing. But your credentials about being a computer scientist in this room is not inflammatory to anyone. We're all pretty much engineers in here, so that can stay out. No disrespect. Go ahead. That's fine.
Engineers on a daily basis. What I will tell you is, Anybody here worked in any of the voting system test labs, whether it be Wiley, MTS?
What's that got? Wait a minute, hold on. What's that got to do with anything? Hold on. This is our meeting. If you don't want to be, wait a minute, hold on. This is my meeting. This is not your meeting. D, you disrespecting me. Let me hear what he has to say without you telling me what to do. No, it doesn't. This is our meeting. Go ahead, sir.
So, has anybody else worked in the voting system test lab?
The
I
vote-
know these systems. I've tested over 7 vendors. And sir, what you did say, you told all the probate judges that they had a hardened laptop. Did you tell the probate judges that the operating system on that hardened laptop was in the lot a year before they were even built? And that the database
They were all brand new when we
that
bought
tallies
them. They were all brand new when we bought them. Let me ask you a question, since you've talked about your background. If there, I don't know how many polling sites there are, you believe there's 90.
Yeah.
You vote every time there's an election in Madison County, or as often as you can?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever worked the polls in Madison County? Have you ever worked the polls? Have you been a poll worker in Madison County?
No.
Okay.
No, I haven't.
You need to work the polls in Madison County. If you work the polls for Frank Barger in Madison County one election, you'd never ask any of these questions again. But until you do that, I think you're operating from a theoretical perspective rather than a practical perspective about what actually occurs in that particular location.
Now,
And this is time for me to introduce something else that somebody else may have that they want to bring up.
Yeah,
I told you it was brand new when we bought it. It was brand new, and it only has one purpose, and that's to be used up for election night reporting. That's it. So I don't really know what the purpose of your comment
You said it was
is.
hardened, but the operating system was end of life a year before the system was.
I don't really think that even matters if it's only being used for one purpose.
Sir, there are over 300 vulnerabilities just between that and the database alone.
Okay,
And I
so
know-
maybe you've missed the point. The point is the computer is used for one purpose, and that's to have unofficial returns submitted to Montgomery on election night. That's the only purpose. That's the only purpose. So
Hold on
it's
one second.
unofficial. Let me say this one more time. Unofficial returns, got that point? That are submitted on election night. That's the only purpose.
I've heard that also from the state of Wisconsin.
Oh, look,
And-
I'm not worried about Wisconsin.
Yes,
Wisconsin's
I know
got
you're not.
issues. You don't have issues here.
Hey, Bob.
But you can say that when you know it's not
Well,
correct.
hold on 1 second. This is what we're going to do. If you feel like, and you come into this room right here, nothing you say is intimidating to us. Nothing you say is going to be inflammatory. Nothing you say is going to make us tremble. Trust me. If we want to set up a system, we will, and we can test it. But your image concept still comes from a ground source. It comes from the paper itself. Now, anything built from that, we can have that discussion. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no sense in being hostile. I'll have Wes here, and if we need to go into software engineering, embedded, we've got rocket scientists right here in this room who deal with it all the time. So I appreciate that. You bringing the question forward. Let's get another question in. Hold on. Go ahead, Judge.
Secretary Merrill, you said there was 8 convictions for voter fraud. Can you share with us some of those circumstances? Be public record, so can you share?
Yes, ma'am, they are, and most of those were in absentee processes. 2 of them were residential issues, and one of them was in Henry County, one of them was in Monroe County, and the other 6 were all in Houston County.
Was it people trying to vote twice?
Yes, in the absentee process, or they were breaking the law related to the administration of the process from the absentee perspective, except for the residential requirements.
You sir, we'll go back to the back. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mary.
This has to do with the ballot, the amendments on the ballot. There were so many of them on there, and I got the impression that people just went and marked yes to all of them, because there were some that really, I personally think should have been no. Is there not a way to have a better explanation of what
There
this
is, and one of the things, Mary, that we have is the Fair Ballot Commission, which was created by the legislature, which meets at the Capitol, that comes up with simple language that a 5th grader can understand. That's required by law, for a presentation to occur on each constitutional amendment that is presented, and that's published on the website. We sent out several press releases trying to encourage people to visit our website so they could read those narratives and understand what was being presented to them for the constitutional amendments. And then after that, cast an intelligent vote about that particular issue. And that has been ongoing for several years now, but that's the process, and that's where it's housed. And that information is still on our website today.
The problem, I think, Chuck goes through and considers all this, and said, we get calls
Sure.
on voting day saying, how do we vote for the amendments?
Sure.
But because they don't know where to look. And I know we say it's on there, but and maybe there should be better directions.
Look, I need a horse to water, but I can make it.
Okay, Bird, and we'll come back this way. We'll come around.
I know where one of my first elections I ever did as a school board. I'd like to thank you for what you've done for the integrity of our elections. And looking here as you're leading your to make our process a little bit more secure, a little bit fair.
Well, it's not related to the administration of the election, but it is related to something I was talking to you about earlier that I may have not made myself clear on. And one of the things, I'm not sure if y'all know this, there's only one thing that will disqualify a person from being on the ballot, and that is the failure by that individual to actually file their statement of economic interest. So that's the only thing that can keep you from being a candidate on the ballot. But I believe there should be at least one other thing that should be added to that, and that is that the candidate does not file in a timely fashion the construction of their principal campaign committee, which is where individuals can go and see who gave you money, where you spent money, and how much you received and how much you spent. And I think that that is the same as the statement of economic interest as far as importance is concerned. So I had two black Democrats that I approached in 2022 and asked them to consider not being obstacles to passing that legislation. Senator Singleton, Senator Smitherman. Because I knew that if they were not on board, they could shut the Senate down and prevent us from doing that. Representative Reynolds can talk to you about the logistics and the dynamics of that and how those things occur. And they both assured me that they would rather somebody run against them, spend $250,000 without knowing who the person was or where they were spending the money or who was giving them money, than they would pass that legislation. And the thing I couldn't understand was anybody that's in the legislature, it doesn't even impact because they've already had to do it. They're already filing it as required by law in a timely fashion. So something happened on election day that I think will be helpful to us. So one of Rex's friends, Prince Chestnut, who is a young black representative from Selma, who's doing a tremendous job, very intelligent, articulate young black attorney down there, and a newly elected senator from Selma who beat Hank Sanders when he was trying to come back to the Alabama State Senate. The guy that ran for the Senate had a candidate run against him that never filed, that spent well more than $100,000 in the race. Still has not created the principal campaign committee. So I believe that the two of them are interested in promoting that legislation, which I think will be fully embraced by Republicans because of transparency and accountability. But the Democrats may have a fight within themselves. But I think if those two Democrats carry the bill, it will really make a difference. I know if I was returning, I would ask them to carry it on my behalf because something like that is not partisan legislation. It's about doing the right thing the right way.
Secretary Merrill, I just wanted to say that I was really excited from the May Alabama, where you and Judge English actually, Alabama.com did a story, and it was talking about how you guys were doing such a great job and that the new hard laptops were not going to be connected to the internet whatsoever. So I got really excited when I saw that in May. But then I saw the purchase order for those hard laptops that was issued in January of this year, and the purchase order for that says that there is Wi-Fi and Bluetooth capability. So if they cannot be connected
On the computers.
Yes, sir.
Because that data is transferred electronically from that hardened computer that we purchased in all 68 jurisdictions in the 67 counties to have one purpose, that's to accept those jump drives that come from that central location in that county seat. That data, which is the unofficial information is transferred from that county seat to Montgomery, and that's it. The actual official results will not even be received by our office for another week. That confirmation for the official results is done tomorrow.
Okay, so they can be, those hard laptops then are connected to the internet for the purpose of transferring the unofficial to your office?
That's right.
Okay, thank you for answering.
So
Yes, ma'am.
So
And then
those-
that's the information that's recorded and reflected on our election night reporting website. And that's why it says on the website at alabamavotes.gov, these are unofficial returns.
Okay, thank you for answering.
So if you have questions, and I may have asked the same questions they would ask, no doubt. I would strongly suggest go ahead and write them down now. I know you have them. And next month we'll have Frank Barger, and I'll get Wes or whomever may come. And you can have answers to those questions before we have the meeting, and they can actually speak to it so that you're interested. So please don't take my energy as I'm negative about your questions or any of that. That's not what we do here at TVRC. Other clubs and organizations don't even let people speak. So I hope that you can understand why I'm being a little bit sharp. Go ahead, sir. One more question.
But mine's a question about poll workers.
Wait a minute, hold on.
She's been raising her hand
Hold,
like 5 times.
that's fine. That's a friend of mine. I don't need people running our meeting. He's been raising his for 20 minutes, like he said, and then she's going to speak. Go ahead.
Sir, what is the background and status of the lawsuit?
Go ahead.
Sir, what is the background and status of the lawsuit to have the names of dropped voters released?
Well, the only lawsuit that we currently have that is still active is the one that was filed against me called Milligan versus Merrill, that is related to reapportionment. And that was heard on October the 4th in the U.S. Supreme Court. I have been sued 29 times as your secretary. 28 of those have been properly adjudicated, and that's the only one that is yet to be adjudicated. We should receive that ruling from the Supreme Court probably in June. 2 other cases have gone to the U.S. Supreme Court, but like I said, it's 28 that have been adjudicated so far, and we're 28-0. Roll Tide.
All right, good question. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you for all the successes of your administration for this election. I'm a new poll worker. My understanding that in 2021, it's been reported that an FBI informant found out that 100% of Alabama poll workers' private data that we use for registration ended up on a Wuhan server. And looking forward, as you're about to be engaged with a lot of China policy, Chinese involvement in our state.
I am.
Well, with the Heartland Committee, the U.S.-China Heartland Committee that is...
Yes, ma'am. I've not been a member of that group for 2 years.
But I'm concerned about a foreign entity and the sovereignty that poll workers might continue to enjoy, such that my personal data did not... It is on a Wuhan, China server.
You've seen that.
Based on a report...
No, you've seen that.
It's based on...
Because I don't know where they would have gotten it, because we don't have it in Montgomery. So are you telling me that you believe they got that from all 68 jurisdictions in the 67 counties? Is that what you're telling me?
That's what has been reported.
No, is that what you're telling me?
Yes, that's what I'm saying from...
So you've seen that. You've seen it. If it were me and they had my data on there, I'd file a lawsuit.
You may not have seen it either.
I haven't seen something that I'm not aware exists, but I don't know anything about what you're talking about. And let me say this to you. I don't appreciate you saying that I'm associated with China. I don't appreciate that. No, I'm telling you that I don't appreciate it because you don't have any facts. I will tell you this. If you talk about my affiliation association with U.S. Heartland China Association, which I was the chairman of the Economic Development Committee for 6 months. I'm very excited about that. Also excited about the privilege that I had to get 17,000 masks during the COVID for rural communities in our state that we would not have been able to have gotten otherwise. And with the 2 visits that I have made to China that were done on behalf of the state, where I was invited and I actually had the privilege to speak. But if you're trying to present it as some kind of negative activity, I personally take offense. I just want you to know that.
Concerned about our protection as a state.
If you've got concerns about your protection, there's a way for you to address that, and it's in the civil court.
Hey,
If
John,
you're not sure how to file that, then I'll be happy to explain it to you. I know that the judge will
We'll
too.
wait till it's down the road and it's more forthcoming.
No, well, there's no, you heard what I said.
John, why don't you talk a little bit about the credentials that you have had to hold in the intelligence community in terms of cyber and everything else, so that.
Well, I have a top secret security clearance, and anybody in here that has had one before knows that there's varying degrees, and mine is extensive, and it had to be done by the government in order for me to receive the briefings that I receive and to do the things that I've been able to do. But that's all that needs to be said about that.
Yep.
Look, you've got a question, but I had something else I was going to share about something else that had occurred earlier that I think needs some attention, and I'll be happy to do that after we get your question.
I had a question about the Libertarian Party. I had read that they needed a certain percentage of the votes to be able to participate in an election again.
Yes, ma'am. That'd be 20%. They had to achieve a 20% threshold in any one of the statewide offices in order to make sure that in 2024, if they wish to gain ballot access again, then they would not have to get the signatures and have the signature requirement met. But they didn't meet that threshold. And so in order for them to gain ballot access in 24, they'll have to resubmit signatures.
All right, so I want to find out, are any one of you from FOA? Are there any members of FOA here? Okay, great. What I'd like to do is, if in fact you would like to have some more answers to those, and we'll see if we can get answers from you. But come back next month, and we'll talk with our Frank Barker, who's a probate judge, and that way you'll have a little bit more detailed information. So I'm very aware of your advocacy throughout this last period. I wish I was able to speak at your club, but I want you to know that you're always welcome.
Share, and maybe somebody in here is aware of this, and you may not be. I may be introducing it to someone for the first time. But was anybody in here aware of the fact that there were some people in Baldwin County and in Lee County that went to a public testing of voting equipment and submitted paper ballots into that? You raised your hand. Did you raise your hand? Anybody else aware of that? So what happened was there were some people that actually requested absentee ballots. They wanted those absentee ballots, and when they got them, they made copies of them. They went to Kinko's or FedEx or wherever they got copies made, Walmart. They had them done. They took them to the public testing. At the location, this happened in May, at the location in Baldwin County, they approached Judge D'Aleve, the probate judge, and said, we brought our own ballots. Do you mind if we insert them in the equipment? And he didn't know what to say or what not to say, so he said, sure. So they went in and they registered and counted those votes. In Lee County, they did not ask Judge English if they could submit that. When Judge English did the public testing, which they were a part of, he told people they could mark ballots and submit them if they chose to, and they did that. And then he stepped out of the room and came back a few minutes later. Then they explained to him they had had some copies that they made, they marked them, they submitted them, and the machine accepted it. And of course, he was not very happy because he didn't know what they were going to do. Well, later that afternoon, I got a call from these people, and they told me about what they had done. And they said that we think this is a major problem. And they said, you don't seem to be very concerned about it. And I said, I'm not concerned about it at all. And they said, why does this not bother you? I said, let me explain it to you. There is not a single election vendor in the United States that has anything other than the option of what you've already done. They call it ballot on demand. And what that means is at the local polling site, if they ran out of your particular ballot style, then they knew that you were coming in to vote in a particular race because they've got your information. They can print a ballot for you at that location, which you can mark it and you can submit it. It doesn't say that it's got to be done on a certain card stock. It doesn't say that it's got to be done on a certain size paper, but you can do that. And then when you do that, you can submit that. I said, that's ballot on demand. But I said, let me say this to you. And if you want to try that anywhere in the 1,980 polling sites, you don't tell me where you're going to do it. Don't tell me. You just decide that you want to do it. You go to any one of the 67 counties, any one of the 1,980 polling sites. You walk in that place. You walk up to any tabulator, and you just put as many ballots in there as you want. Because as soon as you do, I got a jail cell waiting for you with your name on it with a reservation that particular day. So just try it anywhere in the state. You need to do it. Just try it.
And maybe that's
Try it.
and maybe
Just try it. You try it anywhere you want to try it in this county.
That would be a violation.
Try it in this county. Kevin Turner has got a jail cell waiting on you.
And a test when it should be done, when it would be legal to do it. Those are only supposed to contain ES&S. I got the documentation if you'd like to read it from their own technical data package. They require a certain ink and a certain paper stock. And for the machine to accept it that it wasn't that, it's a forged ballot.
Just go ahead and try it, my friend.
So
Just try it.
We're gonna make certain that
Your next election's March of 2024.
yeah. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make certain that we go ahead and close out. But what I want to say was that we have never ever backed away from tough questions, and he's never gonna do so. And if those questions aren't answered, we're gonna find a way to get answers to them. But my point is that we don't have to do so disagreeably, and we're not. But we'll have the opportunity. I want to try it myself one time, to be honest. So he can set up a machine right here. If you want to test it, we can do that's fine. I mean, we can bring machines all day long.
It's going to take.
Different than the test when they did do it and it accepted the ballot. He's saying on physical security. For example, print shop.
Yeah, and I'm also telling you this. I don't know, and you said you'd voted before. Well, that was a question I asked you earlier.
Yeah.
And I've never been to a polling site, and I know you haven't, where you can go in anywhere in this state and there not be somebody greeting you, somebody leading you to the table to check in, somebody giving you a ballot, and then you go into the machine and voting that ballot at that particular time, and that's it. And that's your experience. And anything other than that will add you to the list of 8 convictions on voter fraud that we've had in the state.
So I
Period.
think I was kind of disappointed that. Hold on one second. I was kind of disappointed that we didn't want to talk about the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And hold on, what's driving our elections in Arizona, in Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. This is the problem. We have people who are libertarians, we have people who are independents, we have people who are Republicans. He represents all of them. He does not have a party affiliation when it comes down to the rules. I'm all about making things better. If something is not as best, we can go to 2.1 and 2.2. That's what we do here in Huntsville. We know how to make those changes that make things better. So I'm all about what we can do to make things better. Even if it's not right now, let's make it better. Be a part of the solution. Because you're a smart guy and this is a smart room.
Yeah, let me say this. You know, I have people that ask me questions all the time about all kinds of different things, just like y'all have today. And I only want you to know this. When I ran for this position, I ran with a commitment that I was going to be the best Secretary of State in the history of Alabama. That was the only goal that I had. And I'm very appreciative of that. But I also know that I'm nationally recognized as the leader of the state in election administration in the United States. And I also know that there's people in Washington who look at me that way. I'm going to be with President Trump Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of this week. He's invited me to come to Mar-a-Lago to talk about these issues. I've talked to him frequently about these things over the last year and a half. I continue to do so because he knows how I'm recognized and how I represent election officials all across the nation. That didn't just happen because he just thought that I was nice looking or spoke well.
3 counties that they're taking this test. They're going to take the paper ballot.
This will be sunset after this is done, which is going to be done prior to January, which means as being sunset, once it has been done, it won't be done that way again. Other legislation has to be passed in order for it to happen
So
again.
that's what I'm sorry, sir, to make sure I understand. The 3 counties that they're taking this test, they're gonna take the paper ballots, people are gonna have to count them by hand.
No, ma'am, they're not counted by hand.
I meant for the audit, no?
Yeah, no, ma'am. It'll be better for you to read the report, which we'll send out, and if you'll give me your address, I'll make sure you get a personal copy of it, so you can see what has happened and what's occurred
Would that be
related to that
possible,
activity.
sir, to do that, where they could, somebody, I mean, it might take some time, but take those counties, do a.
Okay, there is, and this is something else since you mentioned that, there is no provision in Alabama law for the hand counting of paper ballots.
But I meant to check the transparency.
Okay, let me say this again.
Yes, sir.
If you want to be a part of that testing and see what they're doing in their audit, then I'll also give you the name of the probate judge down in Marshall County, which is just a little piece from here. You can go down there and watch what they're physically doing. But then if you want to get a copy of the report, I'll give you my card, and then we'll be happy to email you a copy of the report.
Right, but I can.
Listen to the point, Chris.
Go ahead.
John,
Yes, sir.
in several days, you will not be our Secretary of State. What next?
So January the 15th is my last day as your secretary, as your 53rd Secretary of State. On the 16th of January, I'll become the Director of Public Policy and Strategic Markets for Wagner Engineering, which is a multi-million-dollar engineering firm based in Jackson, Mississippi. They have offices in 7 states, and one of those is in Alabama, and the Birmingham office is where I'll be working out of. That's at 280 and 459. And we concentrate in the area of water and sewer infrastructure improvements and road and bridge infrastructure improvements. And that's what I'll be doing, and I'm excited about that. My wife is more excited about it because I'm going to be compensated at a little different level than I've been compensated for the last 30 years of public service, and have a chance to do some things for her that I've not been able to do before. So we're all excited about that.
Well, thank you, John.